There it is, some live shots of the Israeli-Gaza border as we await inflation data in the next 4 minutes from the United States. We'll be getting producer price inflation data. We'll also be covering some of the latest with Israel and Palestine. Israeli airstrikes have so far started reducing Gaza to rubble. Look at some of the Telegram channels, and boy, you can really see the devastation on the ground. It's pretty bad. It almost feels like some natural disaster struck Gaza, and just I mean, buildings are leveled. You see people's stores destroyed, people's businesses ruined, their lives, completely reset. If they've even survived, that's remarkable in terms of remarkably negative and horrible and scary for both sides. I mean, look at this. You've got now more than 1,200 Israelis dying after the start of this land and cultural war. 14 U.S. citizens have died at least. There could be more that are now being held hostage. Gaza officially says that 1,055 individuals have been killed. This is on top of the 1,500 Hamas soldiers that have died in Israel. When we add that together, the current tally of Israelis, Palestinians, and then Hamas soldiers comes out to about 3,755 deaths so far for a region that maybe in total has about 13.8 million individuals. So this is a massive amount of death per population basis. More than a 250,000 Gazans are fleeing, trying to escape to Egypt, but unfortunately the Egyptian border is closed. Food supplies like fuel and even water are no longer reaching the Gaza Strip. There are, some reports on social media of vehicles still being able to make it into the Gaza Strip to deliver food and supplies and otherwise. But the reality of this being able to be dispersed broadly appears to be relatively not good, let's put it that way. The United Nations World Food Program says that the sealed Gaza border is exacerbating the crisis because not only do you prevent aid from coming in, but you're basically trapping innocent citizens in the Gaza Strip. Remember that not every Palestinian is a Hamas or terror supporter, although sympathies can certainly run deep for Hamas, and there can be anti-Israeli sympathies or feelings. There are certainly plenty of individuals in Palestine who do not believe that anyone's life should be taken. World Food Program says they've launched an emergency operation to provide food and assistance to about 800,000 people who need it in Gaza and the West Bank, who lack access to these essentials. However, these deliveries are being blocked as Israel is preparing for its invasion. We're about 1 minute away also from PPI data, so we'll come back to PPI in about 30 seconds, but let's listen in here for a moment.
Like the situation is very difficult for them inside.
My bad. Sorry about that. Okay, so thank you for the heads up that the audio was on the wrong source. I fixed that. Okay, it's now you should be able to hear everything. That's fine.
I do want to note just one other thing.
All right, so PPI numbers coming out. Here we go. So we have about 10 seconds to go for PPI data. We are expecting 0.3 on the headline and the month over month to be 0.2. Let's see what we get. Here we go. Data coming out across the wires. Oh, no, that's not good. It's coming in hot. Well, core came in okay. Core came in at 0.2, expected 0.2 for X-Food Energy Trade. X-Food and Energy came in at 0.3, a little hotter than the 0.2. Final demand, though, month over month, PPI, producer price inflation, that does include energy, comes in at 0.5 versus 0.3 expected. Not good. Final demand year over year comes in at 2.2 versus 1.6. That's hot. And then not only that, but then we get X food and energy at 2.7 X food, energy, and trade at 2.8. So there must have been a big trade beat here or something, but let's look at the data here.
Then the 0.2 we were expecting, up 0.3 versus last month up 0.2, but the previous month, July, was up 0.4%. Strip out food, trade, and energy up 0.2 as expected, following up 0.3. Now the year-over-year numbers on final demand, which is basically the year-over-year headline, up 2.2%. Last look was up 1.6 is what we expected. Again, up 2.2 is the highest since April when we were up 2.3%. The sad part here is in June of this year, we were only up 0.1%. That was the lowest year over year since August of 2020. So we've definitely accelerated there a bit.
Yeah, here's some of that volatility. Let's go take a look here. Not what the Fed would be looking for right now. Now, CPI comes out tomorrow. Consumer price index inflation data coming out tomorrow. But here it is. Let's take a look at what really caused this jump here. Look at this. The leading the increase for the final demand index in September. Prices for final demand goods rose 0.9%. Wow. Prices for final demand less food, energy, trade increased 0.2%. That's good. That's in line. But you still have those year-over-year numbers moving up. So let's try to get a little bit more detail here on exactly what contributed to this. Tomorrow, we do end up getting CPI data. Usually, we go CPI, then PPI. Now we're getting PPI and then CPI. So a little bit of an odd month. But anyway, over the 40% of the September increase in prices for final demand goods can be traced to a 5.4% rise for the price of gasoline. Okay, but what about when we take that out? Prices for jet fuel, processed young chicken meats, electric power, diesel fuel also advanced. In contrast, the index for fresh and dry vegetables declined 13.9%. Wood and natural gas also fell. Services advanced 0.3% in September, following a 0.2% rise in August. Not ideal, not great. Over 60% of the September increase is attributable to prices for final demand services. Well, that's the part that the Fed is really trying to work on getting down. Final demand services, less trade, transportation, and warehousing climbed 0.3%. Final demand trade services moved up 0.5%. Warehousing and transportation declined 0.4%. That's good. Okay, so a 13.9 percentage point jump in the index for deposit services. Okay, was a major factor in that September rise in final demand services. The index for equipment, parts, supplies, wholesaling, health, beauty, optical, retailing, traveler accommodations also moved higher. Application software publishing. Prices for airlines fell. Automobile retailing fell. Okay, not great because it reiterates the whole higher for longer. I'd like to get a little bit specific detail here. Let's see. Let's look at some of these detailed sections here. Let's actually give me one moment. Let's jump in over here for a moment. Let me get the detailed sheets
coming out of the Middle East.
Okay, Rick, stay with us. Let's open this up to the broader panel. I want to bring in Joe Livornia, who is SMBC Nikko Securities America Chief U.S. Economist. Betsy Stevenson, a professor.
What kind of title is that? Jeez, Lord. Just doing massive introductions here. Whatever. I will... let me hear. I got the actual breakdown table coming up here. Definitely, hoping for a weaker CPI after this one. 1 second here.
Definitely a piece of this surge in yields that has to do with better economic data. It moved pretty sharply through the months of July and September and August as we were marking up GDP, but also as the government was issuing and surprising the market with issuing debt. So there's three parts to the rise in yields, and I think all of them have a place in the discussion. Stronger economic growth, greater issuance by the Treasury, as well as more hawking.
Okay, well, that's just talking about treasuries. Okay, here. Let's find this out. So what we're looking at is the seasonally adjusted 1 month percentage change. So we're going to be looking at that right side. That's going to be over here. So that far right column. Let's try to figure out what happened here. We're going to get past food and energy. And what is this? Let's see here. Here we go. Final demand goods. Well, goods actually in aggregate only rose 0.1%. So I'm not worried about that. More worried about services. Here it is. There's that 0.3% final demand services. Let's figure out where this went. Machinery, this is very pro GDP. Professional and commercial equipment wholesaling. Okay. Furnishings down 0.9%. Apparel wholesaling up 4.8%. Wow. 2.2 health, beauty, optical goods retailing. 12.5% on TV and photography equipment retailing. Wonder if that's because the strike is finally relaxing. They're getting a boost here from that. Lawn and garden equipment renting 1.7%. Interesting. Hardware, building, which I mean, these numbers are all over the place. Hardware, building materials. These are big read numbers here. Let me double check this column here because some of those numbers are very, very high. Seasonally adjusted 1 month percent change. Yeah. Wow. Some of those numbers are pretty big. Now I want to see the weight as well. They do not actually give us a weight on this. Okay, fine. Let's see what else we have. Where are those services? Cleaning supplies. How is this up 1.3%? Do we have some crazy adjustments here going on? Or boy, good Lord, what's going on? Final demand transportation warehouse servicing, that's down 0.4%. Final demand less trade transportation warehousing 0.3%. Application software publishing 2.1%. Why? That came out of nowhere. Look at that. We have not seen that kind of boost at all in some of these other reads over here. And these are month over month numbers here. Deposit services. How does it all of a sudden go from negative to positive 13.9? Wow. Wireless communications, 0.2. Bundled telecoms, negative 3.1. This is an interesting report. Passenger car rental, 1.1. Arrangement of cruises is a negative. Health and hospice care up 0.7. Motor vehicle repair down 2.3. 0.6 on gaming. Industrial building construction 0.8. And then we get into some of the meats. Processed meats up 0.5%. Okay, a little bit aggressive. Definitely a little aggressive. Let me see what we've got on some of the suits and some of the notes here, and then we'll get back to what's going on in Israel. But that is not a good read. That's definitely, that should have yields pop higher. PPI, let's see here. Okay, producer prices rose more than expected last month, and predictably short-term yields nudged in response. Ahead of the Fed minutes today and consumer prices Thursday, tomorrow, we're unlikely to see wholesale repricing. In other words, basically like, hey, the PPI read, people might kind of ignore it today, but it's certainly higher. We'll see what happens with CPI tomorrow. Looking at bonds, wow, bonds are barely moving in reaction to this because this is a pretty hot read. Again, remember, I'm going to look at the revisions here too. You've got, revisions just came across. So final demand was revised from 1.6 in the last up to 2%. PPI X food and energy changed from 2.2 year over year last time to 2.5. It's a revision up. X food energy trade down to 2.9 from 3% the last time. So X food energy trade coming in low, but just X food and energy coming in warm. Yet treasury yields, interestingly, wrong button. Sorry, I gotta fix that. Treasury yields. There we go. Treasury yields still down 6.6 basis points. They were down as much as 8 basis points this morning, but you're not actually getting a massive reaction here. Somewhat shocking. Let's go back and listen in here for a moment, and we'll get back to Israel.
A lot of people are employed, and some of the raises they've gotten, some of them have not always kept pace with inflation, but they are still getting decent-sized raises relative to history, and people seem to be spending that money. The government just drastically revised up, by the way, the amount of savings that people had.
That's true. Okay, look at this. This is weird. Like a hot reading on PPI, and the stock market barely moved. I mean, look at that volume coming in, right? You see the volume right here. You see we go from a stable 369.95 to 369.49, 59, 46. But who cares? What, really? You're gonna take 40 cents off the market? That's weird. That's very, very weird. Anyway, let's take a listen here to get some of the latest from Israel, and we'll keep an eye on the market's reaction to this. I want to give some more updates as well that are coming across the pike here. Israel's prime target, by the way, is now being disclosed as the secretive Hamas commander, Mohammed Deif. Over the past 2 decades, Israel has tried to assassinate him many times, maiming him in attacks and killing his wife and baby son. The commander of the armed wing of Hamas on Saturday inflicted one of the deadliest return blows ever from Hamas. This is interesting. I want to dive into that original attack a little bit more, because that's what happens when you have individuals with too much power. Is when they get hurt, they will respond out of spite and anger versus what's potentially logical for the entire country. Because Palestine's now just getting absolutely reamed for this surprise attack. Now, also worth remembering that this intelligence failure is really being looked at as and studied as, like, what happened? How did Israel not know? Did Israel get heads up from Egypt and just ignore them? Apparently, the border warning system, at least according to research from the Associated Press and the Times this morning, suggested that an alert was sent to military officials as the border was starting to be attacked. The monitors that monitor the border were alerting the Israeli military. However, whether it was just early in the morning, Saturday, or there was a false sense of security, the military didn't act on this alert, that there was a potential ignoring of the alert. And by that time, the Hamas fighters were able to use drones dropping bombs on military communication towers along the border, preventing comms, which potentially then leads to this combined over-reliance on border surveillance technology that now is, in hindsight, easily shut down, as well as the mistake of clustering a lot of their military commanders along the Gaza Strip in a single base, which was the first that Hamas attacked and overran. There may have also been this false sense of security that Gaza thought, that Israel thought that, and this is a mouthful, but listen to this. If Israel thinks that Gaza thinks they're being watched, then maybe Israel is a little more tentative in their in their, like, how much they really care about these alerts and monitoring, because they're like, oh, well, they know we're watching. So you kind of get lulled into this false sense of like, probably just a false alarm. They wouldn't attack us. And here you go. It's quite a bizarre intelligence failure. We'll put it that way. Okay, let's take a brief listen to see how Bloomberg might be reacting to inflation and other news. Let's see
what the potentially biggest deal announced globally means for the shale of the Permian Basin, as well as oil globally. This is Bloomberg.
This is the game changer.
Fine. Commercial. Fine then. Fine. Okay, whatever. Everybody's on commercial again. Fine. So trying to get a little bit more of a read here on what we've got here. So here's a headline right now from the Suits. It literally says, oof, the bond rally is going to get a bit of a test now as producer prices comfortably exceeded expectations in both headline and core. This is let's see here. I guess good news is that the narrowest core reading, excluding food, energy, and trade services, came out in line. So if you don't eat, heat, or buy anything from a retailer, you're okay. Trade services inflation, a proxy for margins, rose 0.5% after a gain of just 0.2% in August. Kidding aside, the upside surprise today will raise concerns about an equivalent miss on the more important CPI report tomorrow, which is significant given the market has been leaning towards a soft landing. Yeah, I think that's an interesting comment. It does really suggest that, hey, like this is a little odd. You know, we're kind of like hoping for soft landing, inflation trending down. We know it'll be a volatile trend down, but boy, this is a bizarre one. So then we have Nick T. Ooh, this is actually a fantastic Nick T piece. Hold on a sec. At least based on the headline here. I'm going to pull it up right away so we can just go through it together. Nick. He just tweeted it 1 minute ago. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at this. Let's see. That button. Wait. That? Fix this. All right. Higher bond yields likely to extend Fed rate pause. Officials are signaling that a run-up in long-term rates might be a substitute for further rate hikes from the Federal Reserve. The sustained rise in long-term Treasury yields could bring the Fed's historic hiking cycle to an anticlimactic end. Top GOP officials have signaled in recent days that they could be done raising short-term interest rates if long-term rates remain near their recent highs, which they've been pretty high so far. I mean, we're sitting at what, 4.58 right now on the 10-year. It's not as high as the 4.8 that we saw a few days ago, but you know, again, this PPI and whatever numbers we get from CPI tomorrow could definitely slow us down here. Top central bank officials have signaled in recent days that they could be done raising short-term rates if we continue to see yields this high. Fed raised last in July up to 5.25 to 5.5. Long-term yields started after July's Fed rate increase and gained steam after the September Fed meeting. 10-year Treasury closed at 4.65 on Tuesday, and now it's down to like 4.58. Anyway, yields are still up. Here's the 10-year Treasury. It just shows you that volatile path straight up that we've had. Fed raised rates to combat inflation by slowing economic activity, and the main transmission mechanism is through financial markets. Higher borrowing costs lead to weaker investments and spending. It's true. I wonder how the Goldman Sachs index is doing. Let's look at the, it's called the Financial Conditions Index. And the Financial Conditions Index tells you kind of how tight the market is reacting to, oh, wow. Yeah, that's a little bit of a move here. Let me go on the 5-year chart and I'll show it to y'all. Okay. 5-year chart. That would explain why the Federal Reserve is pausing, at least for the time being. And bets are really reducing that the Fed is going to raise rates at all anymore. Now, a lot of quotes here, some quotes, and then I'll get to this little chart. Logan outlined 3 different approaches. All 3 measures at least half of the increase in long-dated Treasury yields since the end of July reflect higher term premiums. Okay, I mean, this is just people trying to explain what's going on with rates. Financial conditions remain tight. The need for us to act further is diminished. Next Fed meeting's on November 1. That's the HouseHack deadline for now. Let's see if I can. Well, I can. It'll just take me a second. Let me get the screenshot up here of financial conditions. Okay. And here we go. This is the Financial Conditions Index. And what you ought to pay attention to is your original hiking. This is the start of your hiking from the Fed. There you go. And look at this recent rise in financial condition tightness that we had on the right side here. We've actually been trending down. I mean, it's almost been a perfect downtrend, and we completely broke out of this. If I grab a smaller line here, it'll be a little more obvious. Here we go. Look at this. So if I go draw a downtrend, yeah, something like that. That's pretty much your trend right here. And complete breakout here recently. So really shows that markets are doing some of the work for the Federal Reserve for them. All right, let's listen back into Israel as I get more updates from both sides.
One of Phil's favorite people, Roddy Piper, used to say, when you think you know the answers, I change the questions. That's going to happen for Republicans today and tomorrow and could extend well into next week. And there are very real implications for that.
Remember when Jeff Flake left Congress, a Republican, and he said there's absolutely zero reward for working together.
Yeah.
There's zero. And that was then.
I think it's a fundamental problem in our politics, and it sort of mirrors social media.
Yeah, I've actually talked about that before. That's the problem with being the Speaker of the House. It's one of the reasons I said there's absolutely no reason Donald Trump should be the Speaker of the House. If anything, it would just kill his chances of becoming president. It is a thankless job. It's a job that kind of requires you bring both sides together, which is the last thing you want. For typically the strong politician to go in and set through your goals.
We appreciate you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu calling President Biden yesterday, thanking him for his support and telling him just how brutal Saturday's terrorist attack was.
We were struck Saturday by an attack whose savagery I can say we have not seen since the Holocaust. And since we last spoke, the extent of this evil, it's only gotten worse.
CNN's Wolf Blitzer joins us next to put what is going on in the Middle East into historical perspective. Stay with us.
No, thanks.
That foolish decision and allow Iran to access that $6 billion, just like they're allowing Iran to ship tens of billions of dollars worth of oil by not enforcing sanctions. All that money is doing is fueling Iran's campaign of terror across the region.
What is the holdup on freezing the money?
Yeah, I can't imagine why they're refusing to say they're going to freeze it now unless they simply don't want to. They want to continue with the failed Obama-Biden policy of conciliating with Iran, of appeasing Iran, of trying to elevate Iran to achieve some kind of false balance in the Middle East between Iran on the one hand and Israel and its Arab friends on the other hand. What we need right now is strength and resolution. We need to stand by Israel, and we need to make it clear to Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas that we will not tolerate this kind of atrocity that we've seen in Israel.
Senator, we're looking at live footage right now in Gaza City and the shelling that's going on. And there's been this effort, and you served, you know what happens at war, but you already see it in some of the media, and you see some of it in liberal publications to paint Israel as the enemy and the bullies. Can you explain to us the goal of Hamas from a propaganda standpoint?
Well, Hamas's very charter says it's dedicated to the destruction of Israel and the death of Jews. Look what happened over the weekend. Babies beheaded, women raped and mutilated in the streets, families burned alive to terrorize Israel. And Hamas is not just a terrorist group, it's also a governing entity that purports to govern Gaza, which is larger than some sovereign nations, which has 2 million people. Mm-hmm. What Israel has to do is what we did to Imperial Japan or Nazi Germany after Pearl Harbor. It has to completely destroy Hamas.
I'm going to pull off here for a moment. Tom Cotton, by the way, I thought he had a great argument when he was discussing sort of the carrot and stick approach. He's very, we need to show the stick to Iran. We need to show the stick to terrorism rather than the sort of incentive-based strategy of the carrot. No internet, electricity, or water. BBC now reporting that within about the last 45 minutes, there are various different areas that have just lost power completely. It looks now that Gaza's only power station has run out of fuel as Israel's siege continues. Israel did announce that they were cutting electricity, food, and water, and it does mean that Gazans are now going to rely solely on generators. Israel's military of hundreds of thousands of troops are near Gaza and ready to execute their mission. The death toll so far, again, we're at about 1,200. Israel, 1,500 Hamas, and then another about 1,100 in Gaza itself. 17 UK nationals dead or missing, 14 US. Yep, main electricity gone out just in the last 10 minutes here. The main generating station just ran out of fuel at their power station to actually keep their infrastructure generators going, and that is now out. Let's keep listening here.
So you guys are bulking up for going to be a 600,000 man and woman force soon when everyone reports for duty. When you see those tanks and
600,000 force, my gosh, that's a lot of people for an area that's got only about probably it's half of Palestine, so maybe 2.5. Let me find out the population one second.
In Israel, and the whole country is the most of the country is still heavily bombarded.
Yeah.
So
it's 2 million in the Gaza Strip. You got 4.5 million Palestine total. Wow, 600,000. That's literally one soldier for every 3 occupants in Gaza. That's insane. I mean, think about that for a moment. Let's compare that ratio for a moment. Let's do, I don't know, American soldiers. Let's see, how many American soldiers? Iraq. Let's look at the Iraq invasion. Curious about that. So the ground offensive was roughly 20 to 30,000. Additional forces were flown into the region afterwards to build up to 200 to 300,000. Okay, what's the population? 43 million. So even if I go with the larger number, right, like the total number, and I go with 300,000 total, and then I divide the 43 million of Iraq. 1, 2, 3. Count these stupid zeros here. There we go. Okay. So divide that by, that's, oh my gosh, that's one soldier for every 145 citizens of Iraq. Gaza is literally getting one soldier for every 3 people. Holy crap. It's going to be an occupation. You are about to see an occupied Palestine, at least an occupied Gaza Strip.
They need to eliminate all of us, and exactly like ISIS, they want to see a world ruled by the rules of Islam. And we're fighting against it, and we are all together fighting against it.
And the President of the United States made that clear yesterday when he gave that speech. He was 90 minutes late, but eventually he did say, I think, what a lot of people in the Jewish community wanted to hear. I talked to my friend Ken, and he asked some people in his community, and they said the unwavering of support was great. One guy wished he'd called out those in his party, the Democrats who are anti-Israeli. That would have been the icing on the cake, he said. But then again, the president's not going to do that.
Look, for me, you understand, it's a sensitive time right now. All Israelis were very moved by the president's speech, because even if we have some fundamental disagreements with the Democratic Party in some of their policies when it comes to Iran, maybe the Palestinian Authority, but for sure, no one can question the love of President Biden towards Israel. I personally met him several times. He loves Israel. He wants to defend Israel, and we are grateful to
Greatest
him.
enemy. And by the way, the two-state solution's dead forever. You never want Hamas on the West Bank ever.
So hopefully we'll end that. Yes. I assume you're right.
I want you to get this quote. This is according to the UN Human Rights Council director. All parties must respect international humanitarian law. They must immediately cease attacks targeting civilians, attacks expected to cause disproportionate death and injury and civilians and damage. You never target civilians, but when the civilian casualties happen, and sadly they will, that they're going to look to turn everything on you guys.
I'll say something that sounds very bad, but reflects reality. Today, the Human Rights Council are part of the terror machine. Why? Because when they make all these immoral equations between liberal, law-abiding democracies, not only like Israel and others, it's easier for them to apply to put pressure on us. Right. They never deal or counter the real human rights violators. So once they pressure Israel, they're incentivizing the terrorists to continue, because that's their goal, to delegitimize 100% Israel.
100% right, Ambassador. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being.
It's interesting. Will the two-state solution be dead forever? The two-state solution's really been in play since about the 50s, 60s. And let's hold on. Let's listen to this for a moment.
The response is unwavering. Israel unleashing fire and fury on Hamas terrorists.
No, okay, all right. I thought maybe they're going to have some kind of news. Yeah, I mean, the history here is not good. It just again shows that the two-state solution is probably dead in the water. If this is what Israel's thinking right now, they're going to fully occupy the Gaza Strip. I'm convinced of that. I think that's why the invasion hasn't started yet. It's just continue to attack with airstrikes. As soon as the airstrikes pull back, you have the occupying force that comes in, and this is a door-to-door inventorying of humans is what you're going to get here. Everybody's going to get their Israeli ID, and they're going to be screened for weapons. All their properties are going to be shaken down. I mean, you're about to get ready to become an Israeli citizen, basically. I think Gaza Strip is no more after this. It's just an opinion. I mean, who knows? But we'll see. Keep in mind, land-wise, the West Bank is a lot bigger. So what they might do, what wouldn't surprise me, is if they're like, look, Gaza Strip is now Israeli. You could stay here, or you could go to the West Bank, and then they can really fortify against that side. But I don't know. We'll see. Let's listen in.
Border today. Hi, Trey.
Brett, Dana, good morning. We know that overnight Israel continued its airstrikes against the Gaza Strip. Also today using artillery to strike Hamas positions in a variety of locations, focusing on the northern and eastern part of Gaza, where ground troops ultimately are expected to go in. I do want to show you what it looked like at one of those artillery positions earlier today. Right now, the Israeli military is shelling the eastern side of the Gaza Strip. You can see the soldiers behind me. These units are working to clear a path for the ground forces that are staging near the Gaza border. Right now, we're in the car. We're driving to another location. There are Israeli troops at all different points along the border, preparing, waiting for those orders to enter inside Gaza. This country is still reeling from the destruction and death that took place this weekend. More than 1,200 people slaughtered by Palestinian militants that crossed into southern Israel. We spoke with one man today in the town of Sderot as it was under rocket fire, talking to him about what this was like and what stood out in his mind. Take a listen.
We heard for the women and children who were slaughtered, butchered, they were beheaded. It's a shame. The world needs to cry out. It can happen in America and in France and anywhere in the world.
Today on Israel's northern border, there was a strike against a group of Israeli soldiers coming from southern Lebanon. The Lebanese militant group Hezbollah has been firing on this border, opening up this conflict to a multi-front war. Israel was bracing for this possibility. It's part of the reason they called up 360,000 reserve forces and why the posture today remains so strong. We spoke earlier on Fox Live with the international spokesman for the IDF, Richard Hecht, and he told us about the preparations. Everyone here is waiting for what will happen in the coming days and looking inside Gaza to where things stand. Inside Gaza, the death toll is over 1,000 people now. I spoke with a Hamas official who indicated that he said Palestinians will not leave. And Hamas is saying they plan to stay and to fight the Israelis if they do enter the Gaza Strip. It's the latest here from southern Israel, and we do expect those numbers to rise as the rocket fire, unfortunately, continues into southern and central Israel, targeting Tel Aviv this afternoon.
Quick note on some of the PPI numbers and reactions here. I'm just reading from Wall Street regarding the inflation numbers here. Some of the Wall Street commentary that's coming across is that this PPI miss is just going to highlight how important tomorrow is going to be. So if you're awake at this time tomorrow, make sure you are here for the CPI numbers. Those are the consumer price inflation. Well, it's the consumer price index, but it's the consumer inflation numbers. And we'll be getting those tomorrow. Thank you for the $4.99 donation here. Earlier, somebody a bowl. Oh, you're the same person. A bowl of rice. You sent $1.99 earlier, and now you wrote, my theory is that Israeli intelligence had prior knowledge of the attack and allowed it to occur as a pretext for the occupation of Palestine. Yeah, that's I don't think anybody could tell you that That is 100% wrong. That is possible. It's sad to say, you know, maybe they didn't think it was going to be that bad. I don't know. Nobody, I don't think ever will really ever know. But if the goal was to have a reason to take over the Gaza Strip, well, that's what they basically just got, the Gaza Strip. So you know, in hindsight, it does look a little bit potentially fishy. You know, it raises some eyebrows a little bit as a potential. And I know a lot of Israelis are, you know, they hear that this potential of like some kind of false flag or whatever. It's like, no, this was the biggest attack ever. No. Well, I mean, it would take the biggest attack ever, though, to take all of Gaza, right? So like, I do think there should be a little bit of us where we're like, nah, probably not, but I get maybe, you know, I don't know. Anyway.
Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner is a spokesman for the IDF. He joins us now. Colonel, thanks for the time. We were just talking with, obviously, our reporter driving along the Gaza Strip there about the challenges ahead for Israeli forces. Can you go into how that looks, urban combat in a place like Gaza, which has miles of underground tunnels, has all kinds of booby traps?
Ally Financial CEO plans to step down. Max, I saw your comment on that. God, yeah, wow. Futures trim gains after hotter than expected PPI. I don't know if it's actually that aggressive of a trim, though. Let's take a peek here. Yeah, no, I mean, you've already got the NASDAQ moving back into rally mode. Look at that. We are now higher than where we were at the PPI release on the NASDAQ. Go to the SPY here for a moment. S&P 500 is PPI release was right here. You're also higher on the S&P 500. You're higher on Tesla. You're higher on Trade Desk. You're higher on, let's see the dog. Enphase, the dog is higher. It was up 5% yesterday. I think Enphase skyrockets as interest rates come down, by the way. Now, I want to be very clear. I have my little disclaimer here. Where is it? This video is not intended or believed to be reasonably sufficient information to complete investment into any of the mentioned securities. Conduct your own research and know that anything mentioned in this video is not personalized financial advice for you. It does not constitute an offer for sale of securities. Yeah, do keep that in mind. I have to say this stuff now because now I deal with all the SEC regulations and that. That's what happens when you're a financial advisor, you're becoming a stockbroker, you're a real estate broker. There's too many licenses. Anyway, so think about that for a moment. Interest rate sensitive sectors in the stock market are going to be autos, real estate, solar, and to some extent consumption-based stocks, right? Those are very interest rate sensitive sectors. And if there's this belief that, yeah, we might have a volatile trend down in inflation, but as long as it goes away, interest rates will eventually plummet. And that'll keep that'll keep some real support under some of these stocks.
And emboldened and strengthened by the international support and specifically by the comments of President Biden yesterday. You know, when we look at the terrorists, they don't care who they are. You know, they abducted people from different nationalities, and as you pointed out, Americans as well, and Israelis, obviously. They killed and abducted, and they just don't care because they have no regard for human life. You know, they're women, children.
Quick note here that the largest hospital in Gaza has fuel backup for about 4 days. That's it. The hospital already is down to a limited electricity consumption and just essential services. And within about 4 days, they will be down to no power for their hospital. I just think of the children and the innocent people who would be in a hospital relying on potentially life support or you know, ventilators, and this could all be stripped away very soon. It's very sad.
What is a horrible situation. How is, you know, morale as you talk about people getting called up as you're mobilizing really a country against this effort?
The country is united. We've never, ever recruited reservists on this magnitude. And of course, it comes on the backlash of the political instability in Israel, but everybody's united that this type of threat, doesn't matter where you are politically, you have to report. And I would say the society is united. They expect the military to operate. They expect the IDF to deliver the security, and that is what people are demanding. So I would say the morale and respect to the military is high. The expectations are also high. We have to stand up and do what we are meant to do in order to restore security to the people of Israel. Of course, there is a lot of shock in the aftermath of this attack, as there is around the world, because the images that are so devastating of how a human being could do these things to other human beings is really unbelievable. And so you see that, and you understand that society is in a state of shock and stress, but they look towards the military to give that solution so that it never happens again. So I think there's two sides of this coin that are playing when the society looks at us and when they look internally to where we are. The IDF is making its necessary plans. We are striking Hamas where they are hiding. The people of Gaza are paying dearly for what Hamas has done. And I hope that the people of Gaza, who are not our enemy, demand accountability from their leadership and us. Why did you strategically?
I mean, this individual is not wrong. I want to just take a moment to say this. There are a lot of people who are very frustrated, and rightfully so, when they hear people support the terrorism that has occurred, right? The killing of innocent babies and adults, whatever. That does not make everyone who has a Palestinian flag a terrorist. Palestine isn't the terrorist here. It's Hamas. Now, there is an argument by Israelis that, well, what's the difference? That's what some Israelis are arguing. And there are plenty of Israelis who have lost loved ones, and they are absolutely justified to be frustrated, just like innocent Palestinians have the right to be frustrated. It's just a terrible situation. It's war. It sucks.
Fence, and then widened that gap so that it gave them the opportunity to get right in there and commit these atrocities.
Yeah, then they had the hang gliders, and then they had the rockets fired at the same time, and then they took a bulldozer to the fence. I mean, it was coordinated in a number of different levels. What I was trying to talk to Colonel Lerner about was this fighting that's going to happen, and obviously they're planning it out. But you talk about urban warfare and how complicated that is. I talked to General Keane the other day, and we obviously saw some of that in Iraq, in Fallujah and other places. They're talking people who have planned for this, booby-trapped buildings, hidden forces, miles of tunnels underneath where they've hidden these 150 hostages. It is a complex place that fighting street to street is really going to be difficult.
The other thing I thought was interesting, I was reading this morning.
Not going to fight street to street. They're going to occupy street to street. I think the way Israel does this is as they move in with troops, they move in with supplies. And the only way you get food, water, and electricity is if you walk up to that Israeli military and you get your Israeli ID card. You get processed, and then you try to go back to normal. You try to start rebuilding. So I kind of see it as sort of like imagine like a line that just pushes forward. It's like, you want food? You're getting occupied. And you just keep pushing forward. Yeah, you're going to have that fighting door to door, street to street on the front line of this, right? But think about it as an occupation force rather than a strike force. This is not a surgical strike. This is a shock and awe attack and an occupation.
And a bigger sister for Adam and Daria. She's so vivid. She's so smiley. As you can see, she's almost always smiling. She's beautiful. She has a lot of friends. You cannot, you have.
All right, sorry. I'm going to switch. Let's go to Bloomberg for a sec.
At Bright House Financial,
oh my Lord.
We specialize in.
Don't care. It's all too many ads.
could Hamas do to slow down the Israelis if they did move in?
I think they have been preparing for it. You have to assume that the Israeli counteroffensive has got to go after those defensive operations. They've got to likely know where they think they're coming through. So this is a hard border here. There's only certain areas which will allow the speed and shock effect was what Israel would like to bring into that fight. Those positions now have been built up and they've got defenses. So I think this kind of the second thing that Israel had to get, besides President Biden's permission or for the logistics to come in through, they have to soften up those defensive positions. So I think that's why it's going to take a few more days at least.
I want to bring up what could be an even greater concern in terms of the security of Israel right now, and that is the north of the country. Let me draw the borders of Israel here because it doesn't really show up on our map. But you can see here, this is Israel. Down here is Gaza, where all the fighting has been recently, but an enormous amount of concern toward Lebanon because of Hezbollah, which is set up shop really in the southern part of that country. One of the things we learned from 2006 when there was fighting between Israel and Hamas in Gaza was that Hezbollah has multiples more in terms of strength and forces and missiles.
Yeah, tanks, they have anti-tank equipment and the like. It comes down to numbers, 170,000 active duty Israeli forces. They have to put at least 100K down here in order to have any kind of offensive operation there. And then they have to make a tough decision whether they garrison it or whether they just leave it alone. And that leaves them 70K of active duty forces to focus in the north, which is why they recalled those 300,000. I have to think half of those reservists are going to be told their orders are going to be get to the north and just stay there, because this is where the greatest risk comes from. If Hezbollah recognizes that they've overcommitted to the south now, they're going to look at this as an opportunity that they'll never see again.
It's worth remembering, and it's like, I don't want to say it's a minor difference. It's a minor difference if you're not a Muslim, but it's a big deal if you're a Muslim. Hamas is a Sunni Muslim group. Hezbollah is Shia or Shiite. This is almost like the tension between those two Muslim groups has almost been as bad as the tension between straight up Muslims and Jews. It's insane how much religious hatred there is between some of these different groups.
Flight on a much higher altitude. The Iron Dome system, gets those lower, smaller range rockets there. These rockets could come from much further away.
Major Mike Lyons, great to have you. Thank you very much for that. Sarah?
Thank you, John. All right, this is a live look right now at Gaza. On your right, you are seeing smoke billowing. On your left, you are seeing some of the damage from strikes. We have now learned, just in the past few minutes, that the only power station that exists in Gaza for the electricity grid no longer has any fuel. The power is officially out unless you have a generator. With Israel's constant airstrikes and a blockade on all sides, there is no fuel, no water, no food getting through. The humanitarian crisis there will most likely expand. The latest on the aftermath of the attacks by Hamas and the situation in Gaza.
All right. Quick reminder, not tomorrow, Friday, the prices will be going up on the Noob vs. Pro courses. So check those out. Noob vs. Pro crash courses. They're on pre-sale right now. These are really good. They're going to be brand new content. All of my perspectives as a real estate broker, as a real estate investor, financial advisor, real estate. So everything that I can teach you from all of the different businesses that I operate is broken down into these very specific Noob vs. Pro crash courses. You can bundle them together. If you've got questions, you can email us at staff@meetkevin.com. But they're amazing. How to never pay taxes in America, retire early, renovate real estate, sell anything to anyone, fundamentally analyze stocks. These are some of the very popular ones. Boosting your productivity is also very popular. Getting paid more at your job. There's some really good ones here. So check those out. Let's go back to Fox.
You can hear those stories again and again and again. And the amazing part of it is that there are so many of them.
Yeah.
So many of these families torn apart, and those images and moments that they've all had facing these terrorists head to head, one-on-one.
Young people having a great time at a concert in the desert, dancing all night, having the time of their lives. Or
quick note on the inflation again. Producer prices rose on the back of energy and the strongest advance in food costs in nearly a year, but without those components, they edged up just 0.1%. Oh, that's interesting. Wait, so if you take out energy and food, all of the energy and food, Final demand, oh, well, that's just final demand goods, less food and energy. That's the 0.1%. But services had a big tick up there in PPI. So I don't fully agree necessarily with that item there.
You can just scan the QR code on the screen if you'd like to donate. Fox has donated $1 million to this effort, and we are hoping that a lot of money goes that way.
Yeah, indeed. Well, right now, members of the House are getting ready to have a briefing on the war in Israel. The U.S. promising to stand shoulder to shoulder with its Middle East ally, but many Democrats are openly supporting the Palestinians, including Michigan Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who refused to condemn the savagery of the terrorist attacks. Fox Business's Hillary Vaughn pressed the lawmaker, who also planted a Palestinian flag outside her Capitol Hill office.
Terrorists have cut off babies' heads and burned children alive. Do you support Israel's rights to defend themselves against this brutality?
We're just going to go through here.
You can't comment about Hamas terrorists chopping off babies' heads?
So this, by the way, is what I call reverse lobbying. These are kind of like the halls of Congress, where usually you have lobbyists that are like, "Hey, want to go to dinner? You know, want to have like a park with your name on it." But here's just an example where a reporter is trying to ask Rashida Tlaib why she has a Palestinian flag outside her office and why she's not condoning Hamas or condemning Hamas. And she doesn't respond at all. Again, it's important to separate having a Palestinian flag as the country and supporting terrorism as two different things. But it is interesting how the chasing of congressmen and women works in the halls. Let's keep looking around.
Call United Healthcare today.
Nope. Okay, go somewhere else. We're about 8 minutes to market open. Despite this PPI miss, we are at a green pre-market on a Dow, S&P, NASDAQ. 10-year Treasury still down 5 basis points. We'll see how it looks when it opens. Oil down just a little more than 0.75%.
Rarely credits foreign policy, and elections don't often hinge on foreign policy, with a few notable exceptions. I think the level of frustration with House Republicans is extremely large, and I think before the Hamas invasion of Israel and the atrocities, I think that there was little strategy or hope for getting the necessary Ukraine packages through the House. And then there's all this talk now, and it's now bipartisan talk about linking the aid packages together, which is maybe the best hope that they now have for continuing to get Ukraine the arms that Ukraine needs.
Franklin, you've written a book, The Last Politician, about this president of the United States, who is now fighting a two-front war, one in Ukraine, having pulled NATO together in support of Ukraine versus Russia, and now one in the Middle East, Israel against Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas against terrorism. Tom Friedman was on with us earlier today, and he indicated, in his words, nobody had to write that speech for him. It was him, unquote, the speech that Joe Biden gave yesterday. So my question to you is, what was your impression of the speech? And did you think there was a level of righteous anger that you had never seen before in that speech delivery?
Well, I think that speech was extremely emotional. I agree with Tom Friedman that he was channeling his.
All right, this is boring. Sorry. We saw Biden's speech yesterday. He didn't mention Iran once. I'm blown away. Anyway, not surprising, though.
Joyful, and then at one point, some agitators pulled up in that yellow SUV. They began to taunt the Israeli supporters. The pro-Israel demonstrators asked that Jeep to leave, but things began to devolve, and slurs were being thrown around, and there was a physical scuffle, and someone ended up pepper spraying the driver of that SUV. Police were present, but no arrests were made. And ultimately, the Jeep and the driver took off. And there were a lot of sheriff's deputies and police at that rally yesterday. Bill, or Brett and Dana.
All right, Matt, thank you.
I want to check in with Mike Tobin. He is live from the Israel-Gaza border, where the IDF is ramping up their attacks on Hamas terrorists. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Dana. What you see off in the distance behind me is the Gaza Strip. To the north of me, to the south of me, Israeli troops and armor are massing, waiting that order to begin what is believed to be an imminent ground invasion. We know that Benjamin Netanyahu and the security cabinet met last night, but so far we haven't seen any execution of a ground invasion. You may hear some booming during the course of my live shot. That mostly is the outgoing Israeli artillery, as the artillery is softening the battlefield, something they would do before they started to roll armor into the Gaza Strip. You may also hear rocket fire. That is constant. There are new warnings in Sderot just moments ago. We were investigating a rocket strike in Ashkelon to the north of the Gaza Strip when more rockets came in, and an Israeli family took us into their safe room for shelter. All right, this is the location of the latest rocket strike inside of Israel. Here's a piece of what's left over, apparently, from the rocket that hit. This is the point of impact, a stone landscaping wall, if you will. And if you look in here real close, you can see a little bit of the rocket. I can't pull it out because it's buried into the ground, but it is still hot from the explosion. And you look, the rocket hit here. The force of the blast went this way.
Better hope that rocket is fully detonated.
It broke out all the glass. We've got reports of a couple injuries because of this rocket. It appears right now that the injuries are really just the force of the broken glass that went through the next house over, and the individual was hurt. It's gonna be And you can hear the off in the distance, some of the impacts are being made from the rockets. And this is a drill that sadly people in Israel repeat over and over again. And just a short time ago, a rocket reached all the way to Tel Aviv. No reports of injuries from that rocket strike. Now, a contact inside of Gaza tells me that all of the Hamas fighters have gone into hiding. Presumably, they're down in that warren of tunnels they have spent years building. So he says this punishing air campaign into the Gaza Strip has mostly resulted in the destruction of the infrastructure inside, particularly Gaza City. He says it's like they're assassinating a city itself. Power has been cut off to Gaza. Gaza does have an independent power generator, but it runs on diesel fuel. And to the best of our information, they are out of fuel. Dana, Brett.
Mike Tobin, thank you. Want to bring in Dan Senor. He's the author of The Genius of Israel. That is out next month. He's also a former.
Well, that's a lot of folks are wondering, hey, like, why are they doing airstrikes when, ultimately, we got about 2 minutes to the opening bell, by the way, when ultimately, Hamas fighters are just underground. What's the point of having airstrikes in such a case? Personally, I think what they're looking to do is just shut down all potential access to food, water, and electricity so that, you're basically starving out. It's kind of like Rome, where before the fall of Rome, you cut off all the supplies going in, everybody gets hungry, they can't sleep because of the constant bombardment, they're tired, soldiers are weak, they can't fight. And then what happens? Well, then you end up failing. You end up, more easily being overrun. I think that's potentially the strategy here by Israel. To some extent, makes sense. And that's why we have not actually seen the ground invasion begin yet, but we expect it to soon. A couple minutes here to the opening bell. Let's keep listening.
Forces working on this, but doing this in the middle of an urban warfare situation, hard.
It seems like forever ago, but you and I talked in Iraq about similar situations, ground fighting in places like Fallujah, going building to building, street to street. In Gaza, they've planned for this, these tunnels and these buildings and these booby traps. I mean, it's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, and this is why Israel, so this Israeli security doctrine for about the last 20 years has been to avoid just this. So basically, Israel did not want Hamas in Gaza, but they knew that to remove Hamas from Gaza, they had to do a version of what they're about to do. And the reason they didn't do a version of what they're about to do is for that reason, is because the risk to civilian life in Gaza.
All right, let's get that opening bell quickly here. Oops, that's the wrong one. 1 second here. Let's get the opening bell for the stock market, and we'll come back.
Oh my God, he rang early. He went way early. A big deal for the New York Stock Exchange. Here's the opening bell and the CNBC real-time exchange with the big board. Birkenstock celebrating their IPO. We'll talk to the CEO in the next hour. At the NASDAQ, it is Teen Vogue and Culture House celebrating the International Day of the Girl. Okay.
I like the fact that the Wardens are standing at Birkenstock.
Wow, that was a really long opening bell. That just went on forever. So let's see how things end up moving. We've got the NASDAQ here, Birkenstock going public today. You got the NASDAQ up about 0.46, NFA's around 2%, Tesla's gapping up here at the open about 1.3, Palantir up 0.4. Lockheed Martin is a big one. A lot of folks are looking at pretty regularly here. Let's take a peek. You've got Lockheed Martin down about 12 bips right now. They're up about 8% since the Israeli, attack and since the war began. You've got Nvidia looking like it's moving up a little bit here. So we'll see how things continue to move. Let's jump back to Fox for a moment here and get a little bit more updates, and then we're going to go to Al Jazeera live as well. I see some suggestions on that. I actually think Al Jazeera is pretty good too. So stand by for a sec. Let's go here and here.
Piece of land on the Mediterranean. I mean, I've been to Gaza. I mean, you could imagine the potential of this place if you had serious leaders who were serious about governing and developing the place, and instead they turned it into this launching pad for war. And so the question is, should Israel have ever left? I mean, that's the real question, because Israel couldn't control Hamas running for office in the Palestinian Authority or not. But the question is, should Israel have ever left? And I think at the time, you can't blame them. They just wanted out.
Let me ask you this. Trey Yingst is doing a great job. He tweeted out the other day, imagine the worst thing possible that can be done to humans. Hamas did all of that and more to Israeli civilians, babies beheaded, people burned alive in their homes, women raped and dragged.
All right, we've heard this before. I'm going to go give Al Jazeera a shot here.
Confrontation can come out as a winner, I think is simplifying and underestimating the circumstances. The best scenario is to come out of this camp, for both camps, is to come out as no lose, no lose. The win-win situation is out of question. Now the best scenario is no lose, no lose. How do we come out with this scenario of no lose, no lose? If everybody allows, if both parties allow the other party to have a corridor to come to reason and say, listen, nobody can come as a winner out of this. Let's sit and talk logic and let's find a resolution. The only problem or deficiency I see in this is the arrogance of excess power. Anybody who thinks they have excess power, that they can dictate a solution today anywhere in these conflicts, be it in Ukraine, Russia, or Gaza, or what is possible confrontation in China Sea, is foolish. I think the world, I say it categorically, the world is living the most dangerous moments since World War II. And the world now is in a polarization formation, exactly similar to that happened before First World War and Second World War. The world is in desperate need of wise people.
All right, we just got the Israeli energy minister confirming on Twitter that Israel has blocked water, electricity, and fuel from entering Gaza. We've already known that, but they did also comment, we will continue to tighten the siege until the Hamas threat to Israel and the world is removed. What was will not be. Threat there straight to the Gaza Strip. More pain coming.
And I'm also the son of a Holocaust survivor. That is reminiscent of 1930s Germany. Like when I see those images, I see that. So on the one hand, my wife and I do not want our kids watching these videos. There's every Jewish day school right now in New York is sending out messages, get your kids off social media. The images are atrocious. I don't want my kids to watch it. But do I want the world to see it? Yes. Because Israel's going to have to make some really tough decisions in the next few weeks. And I think people need to know what they're dealing with.
Yeah. Dan, we really appreciate it.
Well, it's not true, or not untrue, rather.
Government of unity that would allow for various political parties here in Israel to come together and decide on the best course of action as it pertains to Israel's response to those attacks. In terms of what it means for him politically, this is going to be very significant. The terms of these agreements, if we can confirm this unity government, what guarantees he has given to his political opponents in order to get them on board around some of the members of his current governing majority, particularly leaders of far-right parties that he relies on in parliament, as to whether they will be excluded from military-related decision-making. One in particular, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the national security minister, someone that individuals like Benny Gantz, the former defense minister that Netanyahu's been speaking to repeatedly over the last few days, has said he would not like to see involved in a security-focused special cabinet as part of this emergency government. We'll try and bring you as many more details as we can in the coming minutes.
Thanks so much, Phil. I'm sure we'll come back to you when things are still a little bit clearer, but we appreciate your reporting and updating us. Oh, Israel's military says it's recaptured some areas near the Gaza border. The village of Kfar Aza was among the communities hit hardest in Hamas's attack. As Charles Stratford reports from the scene, dozens of bodies have been recovered.
Israel's military says it's back in control in Kfar Aza, one of the many villages near the Gaza border where Palestinian fighters got in. But soldiers are nervous about more infiltrations and Hamas gunmen hiding in the surrounding fields. Heavy machine gun fire close by.
Wow.
And the bodies lying in the trees begin to appear. Palestinian fighters, and then amongst the destruction of their homes, civilians. Soldiers lift the body bags on stretchers to a waiting truck.
There's still grenades, there's still bodies in houses, and slowly we're now clearing these communities. Whoever survived this is already out of here. Still counting the bodies, dozens.
Weapons lie amongst the rubble. A destroyed paraglider on which one of the fighters flew in. The broken security fence, one of dozens of places breached. What you're looking at there is one of the breach points through which Hamas fighters came into Israel. There's been a lot of destruction here in the village of Kfar Aza. We've seen a lot of bodies, and the military tell us that they are not only Hamas fighters, but foreign workers and many Israeli civilians.
Yeah.
The road to nearby Sderot is littered with destroyed cars and more bodies close by. The smouldering ruins of a cosmetics factory destroyed by one of the thousands of rockets fired from Gaza. And suddenly, the ripping sound of another approaching barrage.
Keep filming, keep filming, keep filming.
We've been in contact with somebody that lived through that nightmare.
We need to kill them. We need to strangle them. Otherwise, it will continue. We can't go back to giving them food, water, building material. Really? We should not give them these things.
The build-up of military equipment near the border continues as Israel vows vengeance for an attack on a scale it has never suffered before. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera, Kfar Aza.
Well, that was actually a really intense piece together here to show you some of the atrocities that are taking place on the Israeli side. I want to just balance this by also showing that, you know, Israeli forces are also striking in Gaza medical forces. Look at this just as a comparison here. Let me do this correctly. There we go. This is from the Times 2 minutes ago. We have the Palestinian Red Crescent Society saying Wednesday that Israeli forces had struck an ambulance in the northern Gaza Strip, killing 3 medics. The World Health Organization, in a briefing Tuesday, said that it had documented 37 attacks on health facilities and ambulances that had killed 6 medics. 9 employees of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees, have been killed since the offensive began over the weekend. This is a sign of the sheer brutality of the attacks on both sides, right? This is war, and it's horrible. I mean, it is now almost specifically targeting the critical support infrastructure for injured civilians. I don't think the ground incursion is going to be much better for those in Gaza. But let's keep listening in here.
Along the border, trying to get a sense of the targets that the Israelis are picking out inside Gaza. Today, the Israeli military indicated nearly 3,000 have been hit since fighting began on Saturday morning, following that massacre of civilians. We're also getting new numbers from inside Gaza that indicate more than 1,000 people have been killed there and thousands injured, many of them militants, but there are civilians among the dead. I want to discuss where we were earlier and what we saw. The artillery that was going off in the background, there's been a lot of artillery fire today, and it indicates that the Israelis are continuing to work their way in on the eastern side of Gaza. They have not yet crossed into Gaza. They're going to work their way closer to the border. They're trying to clear this area to ensure there are no Palestinian militants still in Israeli territory. And then the thousands of soldiers that have been called up are going to wait for those orders and ultimately go into Gaza. The difficulty they face is in the eastern neighborhood of Sajaya, and then the north of Gaza, there's a large civilian population, and Hamas is able to fight within that population. They're able to fire on Israelis from there. So when the Israelis enter on the ground, they will be immediately engaged in a firefight with Hamas militants, Islamic Jihad militants, and others. They will face roadside bombs. They'll face RPG fire. And so that's part of the reason we've seen this strategic patience from the Israelis. They are waiting here in southern Israel for that order. They want to ensure that troops are ready, they're prepared, they have the gear they need.
Well, as the Israelis prepare, what you're doing is you're also whittling down the resolve of those inside the Gaza Strip with the lack of food, energy, water, fuel, otherwise.
A sense of what we're looking at here. This obviously a map. If you look at the state of Israel, the country is roughly the size of the state of New Jersey.
All right, we've seen these comparisons before. Let's listen in over here.
Punished Hamas in Gaza, they are not that much focusing on the civilian casualties, which military usually calls it as collateral damage, but actually it's not. This is what I believe. And they focus on the mission, the end state. And I think the important issue, the priority in here is what is the priority imposed or ultimate goal imposed on the military in this sense. What I see from the sentiments of the Minister of Defense of Israelis, well, he's talking about destroying the overall Gaza. So we have to wait a humanitarian catastrophe over there. Maybe they will dedicate the civilians, Israeli civilians, so we don't know it. So ultimate goal is important, and we have the only thing that we should rely on is the words of the Israeli politicians right now.
All right, thank you for your analysis. Murat Aslan. And these are the live pictures coming in from Gaza. We've seen plumes of smoke for much of the day emerging over the Gazan skyline, and there it is as well right now, a city that's under intense bombardment as well as a siege. We know over 1,000 people have been killed, including children. Power is now out. All basic services, we're told, such as hospitals, are at risk. Gaza's only power plant ran out of fuel after Israel's total siege. At least 1,055 Palestinians, including 260 children, have been killed in the Israeli.
And remember, the hospital's down to what, about maybe 4 days worth of fuel left here? Looking at some of the numbers they're showing up on screen here. Let's move here. No electricity. Here are some of the latest numbers. The displacements. Add to this about 1,500 from Hamas as well, killed on the Israeli side. So we'll see how this evolves. All right, jumping over. Let's see what we have here.
Around in the streets of Gaza, what the U.S. would do or possibly do. Joining us now is Republican Congressman Brian Mast of Florida. He's the only member of Congress to serve in both the U.S. Army and the Israeli Defense Forces. Joins us now. Congressman, thanks for the time. Your thoughts, first of all, on this broadly, and then what the U.S. is poised potentially to do.
Yeah,
danger on a number of different fronts. That's one of the more general thoughts from the north. Obviously, we have the U.S. dealing with the Med. You're hoping nothing lights off in the West Bank, but obviously that's a risk as well. And then thank God that we have these American assets, literally the most capable most capable assets to rescue hostages anywhere, SEAL Team 6 and our Delta operators.
Congressman, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what you've learned.
Wow, quick note on the market. The 2-year Treasury yield is actually up 0.03% right now, so 3 basis points. And the 10-year Treasury is down 5.6. That reinverts the yield curve a bit after the PPI data this morning. That's so confusing.
Most of my colleagues consider it highly probable. We know that they've spoken themselves about involvement in planning that they've taken part in. We know that, they're huge supporters of Hamas, of Hezbollah, of, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, of Palestinian Islamic Jihad. These connections exist even just to the point of moving these thousands of rockets the size of Suburbans from where they may be manufactured in a place like Iran, through Syria, through Lebanon, to get them into the Gaza Strip, and very likely using those same networks, and let's pray to God this isn't happening, to move hostages in the reverse route and get them out of Gaza and possibly into those other places.
Congressman, we were just talking about how you're a member of the U.S. Army, and the Israeli Defense Forces. I mean, that's a unique perspective that you have, as Israel is calling up some 300,000 reservists. I mean, talk about that, and from your perspective, having served.
You go back to 2014, and I made a pilgrimage to volunteer alongside the IDF, put on their uniform, and it was an experience of a lifetime. And this is what they train for and deal with, that their enemy, in so many cases, surrounds them, is in a situation where they could literally travel across the country, if not stopped in a matter of 45 minutes across the breadth of Israel. They could march across. And when you look at how the effect on every Israeli family, it's this. You go there.
Quick note, the EU has given Facebook 24 hours to talk about information or to reveal how they're countering disinformation. You are also seeing letters being sent to Twitter on that as well. I'm just getting now a breaking headline here. Israel forms emergency cabinet with the opposition. Yep, this is the occupation. This is what I'm talking about. They're destroying the government of Gaza, the Palestinian government, and they will replace it. Israel plans to announce the formation of an emergency government on Wednesday night. Well, let's see. It's like 5 o'clock over there now. Let's see. Israel time. Yeah, it's 4:47. So within the next few hours here, we will hear that Israel is announcing an emergency government with Palestine. And the emergency government will remain in place until the end of the war with Hamas. Here comes the occupation. This is going to be like the Blitzkrieg. Germany versus Poland, and then you get occupation. Let's just hope it actually is fast.
Side of Hamas. Well, this is an entity that we've yet to see that any of them were working immediately to stop the Hamas.
Moon here donating $4.99, saying one thing to consider: last time Israel was attacked, Hamas used hospitals as shields. Yeah, I mean, very, very logical for a terrorist organization to do that. Is not uncommon.
Hamas fighters, if you choose to separate them in that way, to any kind of justice, and they have not. So when you see members of Congress stepping up to say you should make a separate state out of that, or saying that the Palestinian Authority is somehow better and not of the same ilk, that is that soft on terror, soft on the brutality that is them. That's part of what has allowed this to happen. It's that camel's nose under the tent.
Congressman, we're obviously covering this wall to wall, but we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you about the speaker's race and what's going on behind the scenes with the House Republican caucus. Is it coming together? How are you going to vote?
I believe it is coming together. You had just a heart-to-heart time a couple of days ago. People able to get things off of their chest, which sometimes just needs to happen for families to be able to speak to one another. I think that brought us to a better place than last.
Yeah, okay. Reuters now reporting as well. Parties agreed to form a war cabinet comprising Netanyahu, Gantz, and Defense Minister Gallant. At the same time, Carolyn Ellison resumes her testimony today. Let me see if I can get any more color on this by clicking on this alert. Hold on here. I have the Refinitiv news stream here. This is no, it's just that headline. It's all coming through. Former Israeli Defense Minister Gantz, centrist opposition party to join the Netanyahu government. All right, we'll stay tuned for more.
That way. Yes, I'm supporting Representative Jordan. I think he has the best plan going forward to do this. I think also very importantly, and this is not a slight against Representative Scalise at all, but the country has a trust in Jim Jordan. People in my community and across the country have a trust in Jim Jordan. I see representatives across the board constantly saying, well, look, Jim Jordan supported this for these reasons. That's one of the reasons that you can trust that this is good.
All right. Something else to consider here. I see a comment here. It says, people say Hamas has years of weapons, fuel, water, and food in their tunnels. Here's the problem with tunnels. There's a really big problem with tunnels. And it's very, very simple. I want you to think about this. And then after I say it, I want you to think about the kind of perspective you're going to get in these awesome new Bruce Pro courses with prices going up on Friday. Go to meetkevin.com to learn more about my actively managed ETF, financial advice, new Bruce Pro courses, shadowing Kevin, my real estate startup. Everything's at meetkevin.com. Just a little banner on the top. So the problem with tunnels is it's extremely difficult to run generators because you have to exhaust the generators out of the tunnels. Otherwise, you just kill yourself to carbon monoxide poisoning. That creates issues because as you exhaust generators to the outside, you generate not just energy, but also noise and smell. The odor of an operating generator is like, here we are. So you have really big problems with tunnels. Tunnels can be stocked to the brim, but if you don't have light and you don't have, an unlimited supply of batteries, it's very difficult to actually function off of just preserves in tunnels. You have to come to the surface. And that's what is about to be completely occupied. And then as soon as you get the Israeli Defense Force that finds these tunnel entrances, I think you know what's next then.
By the British government or indeed any opposition parties. I mean, Hamas back in 2021 was designated as a terrorist organization. And as such, the British Home Secretary Suella Braverman has told British policemen that if any Palestinian flags are flown, any unsavory chants chanted at pro-Palestinian rallies, then people could well potentially be arrested. Those moves could be seen as illegal, and that's very much likely to deepen the rift that is already pretty big between opposing versions, opposing interpretations of what we're seeing play out in Israel and Gaza. Very, very little reference, if any, to the plight of Palestinians. We have had few comments, probably the most vocal, and we had him on Al Jazeera earlier on in the day, from Hamza Youssef, the First Minister of Scotland, whose relatives are in Gaza. He's probably one of very, very few prominent politicians who are doing everything possible to try and shine a light on what's going on in Gaza and call for a humanitarian corridor.
All right, thanks so much. Neve Barker there from London. Well, Hamza Youssef is First Minister of Scotland. His wife's family is trapped in Gaza. I spoke to him earlier.
We got an update this morning from my mother-in-law. The message said, we're alive, and that's what we needed to hear. Beyond that, having exchanged a few more messages with her, it was a terrifying night. The building they were in, the house they were in, shaking. The 4 young children who are under the age of 7, the youngest only 2 months old, screaming throughout the night, as you can imagine, as the bombardment rocked their neighborhood and rocked the whole of Gaza. And they are, my mother-in-law said...
Yeah, correct. They operate tunnels from homes. Well, no, that's the idea. And that's exactly why you're going to see door-to-door raids here. I do think this is interesting. There's a note here about U.S. Special Forces coming to help rescue hostages as well. Let's listen in. Oh, they just pulled off on that. Okay, now we get a lawnmower ad. Okay, we'll see if U.S. Special Forces actually do get involved in hostage negotiations, or maybe not negotiations, but recoveries. Let's listen in.
Fernando Valle of Bloomberg Intelligence to get his take on what is happening here. Fernando, you listened to the interview. What did you make of it? What is the key takeaway from this deal?
Well, I think the key takeaway is, as you guys said, it's bringing together two majors that will actually optimize drilling in the Permian and potentially lead to higher recoveries. Shale has a very low recovery rate for the original oil in place. It started at 8% and has been climbing towards the low teens. So any small increase in that recovery rate can mean huge resources that are unlocked. So anything that Exxon can actually deliver on the 2 billion annual synergy targets that they've mentioned would be really productive for the U.S.
Do you think that DC is going to like this deal?
I think they don't really have a leg to opine against it because of two factors.
The green stuff, like they could say, oh no, spend more on wind and solar or something.
Yes, but they can't dictate how companies invest. At the end of the day, they're sovereign on that end, and they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. And then the second part is on the concentration. As Scott Sheffield mentioned, less than 15% of the Permian. They approved the Chevron.
Okay, well, let's pull back off this and see what we have here on Al Jazeera.
If they made their way to the Rafah border right then and there. So they quickly packed a bag. They were saying their goodbyes. They're about a 30-minute car drive away. They were about to leave to get in the car when they were told the news that Rafah had been bombed and that the crossing was closed indefinitely.
That must have been very terrifying for you, the thought that they could have been in a spot that actually got bombed in an Israeli airstrike.
Absolutely. Absolutely terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And that's the point. Either they stay in their house in Deir Balah in Gaza, and there's a chance that they will not survive, or they make a journey to a border that is sometimes open, sometimes closed, and they may not make it alive to that journey. And I think this is my point, that I, as the First Minister of Scotland and the Scottish Government, completely understand why Israel wants to protect itself from terror. I understand that. But the price cannot be the collective punishment of 2 million people, over 2 million people in Gaza, the majority of whom are children.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say, first of all, I don't know that the majority of the 2 million people living in Gaza are children. Let's think about that for a moment. Gaza Strip demographics. Let's see what we can find out. That doesn't even make sense. But I would say I don't know that you necessarily end up having to punish everyone, but you are going to create you're going to create a new government without a doubt. And you're going to occupy this territory. So let's see what we have. We'll get some children numbers here. We'll get some figures, but let's listen in more over here. It's dramatic footage. I mean, it's just terrible. I mean, these are the atrocities of war. It's terrible. Jeez. Yeah, I'm going to just lower the volume here since it's just music right now. But, boy, I mean, it's just pure destruction. You know, days ago wouldn't have looked like this. That's for sure. It'd be interesting to do sort of a before and after. Let's see if we can, while they go to commercial break, let's see if we can go. Let's go to Gaza City and let's see what we got here. So we'll take the little buddy guy and let's see. We'll pull this up in just a second here. There we go. Okay. So what I've done is I just went to Google Maps Street View. Let's take a look for a second here at Google Maps Street View while everybody seems to be on break. Yeah, I mean, looks like a normal functioning city. Some beautiful palm trees here. It's I mean, it's certainly not a wealthy city, but You know, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like Cozumel, but it's functioning. That guy looks like he's walking around with a gun. It's just his phone. But I guess they don't have crosswalks. Okay, let's keep going here. All right. Interesting. That's just kind of a little porte-cochere over here for your apartment building. Oh, some interesting footage that Google Maps here got. Wait. Oh, are they walking this? Is this like walked Google Maps footage? Anyway, all right, let's listen back in over here.
Soldiers. And Israel is on alert for possible combat along a third front after detecting rockets fired from Syria. So, catching you up there. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Dana Perino. Good
And I'm Brett Barron for Bill Hemmer. Good morning again. Israeli jets hammering Gaza, hitting Hamas targets, softening the battlefield, helping pave the way for ground forces. It's going to be tough as rockets fill the sky across Israel and Gaza. Meanwhile, as we've been telling you, at least 14 Americans dead, and they don't know, at least another 20 considered missing, some of them possibly held hostage in Gaza. There's no more electricity in Gaza. The only power plant there running out of fuel. They've also cut off electricity and water. The Israelis have. And as the USS Gerald Ford carrier strike force arrives in the region, an Iranian-backed militia in Iraq is threatening to attack American bases in retaliation if the U.S. intervenes in any way in the war between Hamas and Israel.
We've got the latest for you this hour. We start with Mike Tobin. He is live on the ground in the war zone. Good morning, Mike.
And Dana, what you see behind me off in the distance is the Gaza Strip itself. You may be able to hear the Israeli jets overhead. They are constant, and the pounding of the Gaza Strip is constant. To the north of me and to the south of me, Israeli troops are massing. Israeli armor is at the ready, ready to get that order to begin what is believed to be an imminent ground offensive. We know that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with his security cabinet last night. If they gave the go-ahead for the ground invasion, it hasn't begun to execute at this point. But we do know with the Israeli soldiers, they understand the complexity of this asymmetrical warfare, that Hamas never thought they could topple the Israeli army. Simply what they were going for is the PR battle, trying to create as many scenes of carnage as they could and generate some sympathy. Meantime, in the Gaza Strip itself, the air campaign has been relentless. The Gaza City itself has been subject to withering strikes from the air. A contact of mine in Gaza says the Hamas fighters have all gone into hiding. Presumably, they're dug into this warren of tunnels that Hamas has spent years and years digging underneath Gaza City and the Gaza Strip. So he says the air campaigns have been ineffective in terms of killing Hamas fighters. As we know, there have been a great number of civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip, and you had to, and that was expected because Gaza is so densely populated. But he says mostly what you see is a destruction.
Russia, by the way, calling this situation the hot stage of hot water, that this could escalate very quickly.
You talk about power. Power and water have been cut off to the Gaza Strip. They do have an independent power generator, but it runs on diesel, and the best information we have is that it's out of fuel or it's running out of fuel. Dana and Brett.
Mike Tobin on the scene. Thank you so much.
In other news, you've got F-16 jets expected to show up in Kiev, Ukraine, towards late 2024, 2025. Really setting up for a long war out there, too.
That have been separated. Tell us about your daughter-in-law.
Well, first, I would like to send a blessing to all the families in Israel that lost their loves and all the injuries. Well, about my daughter-in-law, her name's Celine Ben David Nagar. She's
jump around here for a bit.
And what Israel now needs is experience and characters, authoritative characters in position who reflect the unity of the Israelis. So this, as I'm being told now, I'm just getting new reporting on this. This is an emergency cabinet, a war cabinet at this point.
And Becky, for those who, I mean, aren't familiar maybe with, I'll call them the players within Israeli politics so much, just some background here of what a big deal this is as you describe it, because these are political parties and these are men who are, before now, deeply hostile to one another in terms of the politics of Israel. And it really does underline the scale of the crisis, how much has changed in Israel since Saturday. Just the background, if you can offer, of kind of earth-shattering is what Saturday was with the Hamas terror attack, and this as a response to it. Just the perspective on that.
Yeah, well, I think if we just step back and consider what is been going on here for months and months, has been this deep division, reflected on the streets of Tel Aviv and around this country by, hundreds of thousands of Israelis demonstrating, protesting against what has been Israel's most right-wing government ever. This sense now that there is an absolute need to bring those who are running this country together, in a war cabinet that can now address the security concerns that Israel now faces with experience. There has been, much talk around the judicial reform, of how Benjamin Netanyahu and his right wing have not been focused on what Israelis themselves believe is important for them. And on Saturday morning, that was revealed. Security and protection. Why was there such a failure of intelligence? Why is it now that Israelis feel such a sense of insecurity, of vulnerability? And it was to the Prime Minister to organize around him to ensure now that the fingers of blame aren't pointed at him squarely on what happens going forward. And now, the crucial nature of what is in play here, the complexity of what happens next with regard any ground incursion into.
Well, I think we've got a pretty good idea that at this time we are waiting to see the scale of the incursion into Gaza. Again, I expect it's going to be an occupation, much like Blitzkrieg into Poland, and Israel will establish a government in Palestine very rapidly. Specifically the Gaza Strip region, especially this talk about a unity government, an emergency government. I think that'll get extended into these various different parts that end up getting invaded by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, and we'll see as that incursion begins. For now, it looks like we are left with Hamas potentially camped out in tunnels and homes in the Gaza Strip. Very difficult to get out of the Gaza Strip, by the way. You can't go into Egypt through the southwest. You can't swim out of there through the west. You can't go north because we got Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's going to be a little bit more challenging. And that's northern. You'd also have to go through Israel to get there. Keep that in mind. Because the northern border of the Gaza Strip is Israel. Can't get to the West Bank because you'd have to go through Israel again. So really, and then of course, if you go east, you're in Israel as well. So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here. I think you just have to pray if you're in Gaza that the building you're in does not get struck. Although even ambulances are now being targeted by Israeli airstrikes, and the United Nations complaining about the targeting potentially of rescue workers, all really part of a shock and awe campaign to starve out the individuals in the Gaza Strip, weaken them both morally, but also with lack of food and lack of water, reducing their ability to fight, very much like Rome was starved out hundreds of years ago. It's going to be quite devastating. So We'll keep an eye on how things continue to develop. I'm going to run to the course member live streams. If you ever want to be part of the course member live streams, make sure to go to meetkevin.com. When you go to meetkevin.com and you check out the courses, you can add the live streams in when you check out for one of the crash courses. The crash courses on building your wealth, pretty powerful, pretty amazing. They're all brand new content. We're using the Blackboard for it, so it'll look very, very good and professional. It's going to be very exciting. A lot of these prices go up Friday. At the top here, you could click on the free newsletter, totally free newsletter. Learn about my ETF, learn about HouseHack. That's fundraising through the 1st of November. Financial advice with Kevin, Shadow Kevin, all these links here. And if you just want every single live stream or course member live stream I've done, the full-blown courses, buy sellers, crash courses, you name it, you want everything, you could join the Profit Portal. If you already have one course, you could email us at staff@meetkevin to upgrade. Keep in mind that even though I'm a licensed real estate broker, licensed financial advisor, becoming a licensed stockbroker, this video is not personalized financial advice or real estate advice for you. It is not tax, legal, or otherwise personalized advice. Video is generalized information perspective. Video is not and shall not be deemed reasonably sufficient information to make an investment into any kind of security. Even though I mentioned securities like Enphase or Tesla or whatever, and it seems like we've had a little bit of a drop here in the market, some volatility. We had a nice little run there, a little bit of a drop. Even though I mentioned these could have bullish positions in them, actually I do. So keep that in mind. And a quick look at oil. Oil now down over 1%. WTI down 1.4. Brent down 1.03. 10-year Treasury down 5.8 basis points. 2-year Treasury, though, up 2.6 basis points, contributes to the inverted yield curve. And indices green across the board at the moment, though less green than they were when the market opened. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate y'all. Do check those all that information out at meetkevin.com. You can also go to househack.com directly if you want to learn more about HouseHack. Appreciate y'all, and we'll see you in the next one. Good luck. Stay safe.